Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am Amanda,
I'm Laura.
And I'm Kendra.
and we've said this before. We read the book so you don't have to, and we are going to talk about a really good one. All three of us have read this, and all three of us were impacted by it. It is the book Us, Getting Past You and Me to Build a More Loving Relationship by Terrence Real. It is so good. Okay, so we wanted to get started by summarizing the first few chapters, and so Laura's going to start us out.
Okay. So, as Amanda said, this book, if you haven't read it, she says, well, you don't have, we read the book so you don't have to. I would say you need to read this book. I will be rereading this book for the rest of my life. It is so very, very powerful and gives a framework for us to be able to understand why we and the people that we love show up in the ways that we do in our relationships. He talks a lot about the concept of a wounded child, an adaptive child, and the wise adult. And these three individuals all reside within us. And this is the way it goes, is that when we were kids, something might have happened to us and we had, a wound. We felt terrible about something. For me, maybe my parents were fighting, screaming, and I felt terrible. So I would do something to help myself feel better. And that is my adaptive child. My adaptive child would go and hide under the bed or in the closet. And the way that can show up in my adult relationships is that when things get a little hairy or hard or stressful, I will withdraw and I won't say what's on my mind always, or I won't try to figure things out. I just am like, I'm out. See ya. I can't deal. Versus the wise adult. And when we are in adaptive child, we are oftentimes in a reactive state. Stressed will often send us into adaptive child. Wise adult is where we want to go, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So that adaptive child is really rigid and harsh, perfectionistic and unrealistic, relentless, very certain that they are right, has a black and white sense of right and wrong, and they feel, if you're talking about the way it shows up in our bodies, they're very tight and kind of combative. It is when we're in either fight or flight or fawn. And so it's a defensive kind of posture that we assume in adaptive child. In the wise adult, and these correlate with parts of our brain as well. The adaptive child is when we're working out of our limbic system, when we're working out of our emotional brain, which is, by the way, not the problem solving part of our brain, not the part of the brain that's going to show up as our best self. The wise adult is the person that can regulate themselves emotionally, which means if they notice that they're starting to have their heart race or get stressed or out of sorts, that they take a time out. They don't continue in the conversation because they know that they're not going to be wise adult anymore. They're going to be adaptive child. So in that, wise adult is very in the present moment. They don't like rehash things from 10 years ago. They care about the relationship. They care about the us more than acting like an individual. Or, you can think of the adaptive child as kind of like a young childlike behavior. Like, this is mine, very concerned about their own rights, very concerned about people doing things to them, being very indignant. The wise adult can see nuance and can see where they have a part in any situation. When we're in our wise adult selves, we realize that we can't control other people and we stop trying to. We try to see where we are blind and where we need to improve ourselves to become the best version of ourselves that we can. And when we're in wise adult, we're up in our prefrontal cortex. He talks about a concept called relational mindfulness. And I'm going to say for us doctors, medicine is not a relational culture. It's in general, it's a very hierarchical culture. It's very power over versus power with. It's not relational. So when he's talking about relational mindfulness, he means we're choosing to be centered and not acting on our immediate impulses. We are accessing our right brain. We are caring about the ecosystem that we live in more than our own personal rights and needs. And this isn't to say that we give up our rights and needs, but we aren't demanding things of other people. We realize we can provide for ourselves, and we care about this ecosystem that we live in, this relationship that we are having to live in, and we don't want to pollute it with a bunch of negativity. That wise adult says things like, when this happens, I feel sad. Or when this happens, I feel frustrated. And I'd like to know what you think about that. And is able to listen to the partner do the same, and able to make repair by saying, I am so sorry. You felt sad. Like, that's the last thing I would want to do, is to do something that would make you feel like I made you feel sad. And I just want to know, is there something I can do now or say that would make it better? So that's what wise adult kind of looks like. Relational life therapy was developed by Terry Real, and he's a marriage and family therapist who has been in practice for over 40 years. And his assertion is that change starts in you, in our own selves. We can't change our partners. We have to heal ourselves first. We have to look at whatever happened in our childhood and heal that, so it's not showing up so much in our adult relationships. He says that at best we can stay in, the very most mature people, most emotionally mature people are only in wise adult about 70% of the time. I mean, honestly, I remember a time where I don't even know that I knew that I had a wise adult. I was very much in adaptive child, as many of us, especially in American culture, spend a lot of time in adaptive child. He says that when we heal that relationship with ourselves, when we heal ourselves and become radically honest, assertive, and kindly assertive, he's big on, pairing assertiveness with kindness and loving assertiveness, and having a passionate connection, not only to their partner, but to themselves. Terry's wife, Belinda, is very entertaining to hear him talk about him and his wife, because they had a very combative relationship that I think has really informed his therapy. And so it's so funny because he talks about how she tells him sometimes, you were late for dinner and we felt like you didn't care about us, and I think you need to go back to therapy for your narcissism and go on medication. And so she's a pretty fiery lady herself, but she coined the term relational heroism, when every muscle in your body wants to do the same old thing, but through raised consciousness, insight, and discipline and grace, you choose a different track in the moment. So you were able to divert those natural reactions, which are often defensiveness or trying to be right. Doctors try to be right a lot, and shift it in the moment so that we can be a relational hero. And we shift from those automatic adaptive child, you and me behaviors, to something more connected and relational and mature. It's funny, like until a few years ago, I did not realize that, because, when I grew up in this dysfunctional household and I was the hero child, I was the person who was kind of making peace and keeping things, trying to manage my parents. And I was always told, oh, you're so mature. You're so mature. And guess what? That doesn't mean that as adults we are mature. Just because we grow up, it doesn't mean that we are mature. Being mature means taking responsibility for everything that we are doing and how we show up. And not blaming people for triggering us, or blaming other people for making us mad or angry, and just claiming our adult self.
So Terry does comment on the idea of being an individual is actually just a self-perception based on acquired knowledge. When you are first born, you're symbiotic with your mom, and it takes a while before your brain can even conceptualize that you're anything different than connected. I love the whole story of Jill Bolte Taylor when she had the AVM rupture in the left part of her brain. It completely knocked offline the whole left hemisphere, which is the part of your brain that tells you where you end and where the air begins, and that you're a separate entity. When her left hemisphere was shut down, she had this incredible sense of being one with everything. And that's what's so funny about people who are searching for enlightenment and really advanced spiritual leaders. When they do MRIs on their brain, when they're having a religious experience, it's not that something is lighting up, it's that their left brain is shutting down. And so there's this underlying connection that we all feel. It's just that with our training and with our lives and with everything that we've acquired, we've forgotten that we are all part of something bigger. And so I like that this book is named Us. We get in our relationships this oppositional me versus you habit, forgetting that it's really an us. We're really a team. We're really all connected. And so he's talks about social baseline theory, which is a framework that explores the relationship between social connections, health, and well-being. And what it suggests is that humans are adapted to be in a social environment and being around others because it helps you conserve energy. We tend to consume more energy than it takes to survive, but when we can all pool together and one person builds the houses, the other person farms the field, the other person cares for the kids. When we pool our resources, that's how we are able to survive in a much better scenario. So social baseline theory suggests that being connected with others and in social settings helps us conserve energy. It also helps us regulate emotions. Humans find it much easier to co-regulate each other than trying to do it all yourself. And it also helps reduce risk. I mean, this is why there's school of fish, because one fish swimming alone is at a much higher risk of energy and predation. Same thing with humans too. So, and there have been studies of like when you're holding a patient's hand during a procedure, it can actually diminish the stress, especially if it's somebody who you're familiar with and love. That hand holding in a medical procedure can have a tremendous effect. So the last thing he talks about is that subjective experiences are far more important than the objective reality. You can get in a whole fight about, I said this, yes, you did, no, I didn't, yes, I did. What is the point of all of this? The fact is, and we know this from patients, they'll come in saying, I was told to come here and get whatever. That's not documented, but it's their understanding. So your partner's understanding of how an experience went down is far more important. That's what you're dealing with. That is their reality. And so just letting go of your experience of reality and just, this is what my partner is feeling. Okay, now where do I want to go from there? Just accepting that what they are experiencing, whether or not you agree, is what their subjective reality is. And it will help you relate in a much better way. So one thing he mentions is that couples can have different facts, but the goal is to start to understand each other, to start to be relational rather than individualistic. And part of that is becoming aware of what triggers you, what makes you activated. You're going to be far better able to explain it. We expect our partners to know everything about us, and we don't even know everything about us, which is kind of funny. Like, how could they possibly know when we don't even know ourselves? So becoming aware of what triggers you, then starting to determine what the emotional environment is with your relationship. Is it toxic versus healthy? And then starting to wonder, what does your partner need? And do you even know how to meet the needs of your partner?
Yeah, so I think this is huge. I mean, that awareness piece is huge. I mean, I know when I personally started coaching, there was a lot that was, mind blown moments just from unawareness, like getting asked questions and being like, I should know this, or like I should be able to spit this out. And then I got stopped in my tracks. Like what brings you joy? I forgot because I'm too busy surviving, working, raising kids, like all the things. I was just like, it seems that it would be an obvious question. But then we kind of round out the first couple of chapters and we get a little, okay, we're scientists, we need a little bit of the neurobiology. And so he talks a lot about the interpersonal neurobiology, and it's really the study of how our brains, our CNS are formed through our relationships. And there's a lot of studies that back this up. How we form that intimate connection as a child is really what we're going to, or how we're going to perceive ourselves in an intimate relationship down the road when we're supposed to be intimate with another adult. And so it's really the groundwork. And that doesn't start to become clear really until you get into an intimate relationship with another adult that may or may not have the same information, so may not be aware, maybe the adaptive child not sure what the wise adult looks like. And so part of this is what Amanda was saying. We partner in the intimate relationship to actually co-regulate each other. We're never meant to individually regulate our nervous systems. We really take in cues from all around us, and that's especially important in our intimate relationships. We know this. There's lots of studies out here. Secure relationships leads to increased immunity and less disease, lower scores on depression, anxiety scales, and higher well-being scores. And on the flip, insecure relationships increase stress, you're sick all the time, and then you die. So really that connection, that intimacy that we're really looking for and we're bidding for all the time, it's just not always recognized, is because we long for also the physiologic response in our bodies. So the oxytocin, the dopamine, the feel good, right? The serotonin. So relationships are just this ongoing, we've talked about this before, where we're continually repeating the cycle of harmony, lovey-dovey, we're on the same page, to like crash and burn, at war, and then the repair, right? We talked about repairs already. But a couple of examples that he used just to like further drive this home was in 1950s, Renee Spitz studied orphanages because they just had this high death rate. And it wasn't anything specific, like they were immunized, all they got proper care. They had all their basic physiologic needs met, like the bed change, swaddled, burp, like all that, but they weren't held. They weren't interacted with. They never had a chance to emotionally synchronize with one of the caregivers. None of that happened. And so cause of death was failure to thrive. Spitz argued that it was loneliness, that basically these babies died from loneliness, the lack of connection, the lack of synchronicity with any of the caregivers to help co-regulate their nervous systems. Once again, another study was on prisoners that got placed in confinement. This wasn't actually very long ago, like less than a couple of decades ago. They studied at the University of California these long periods of solitary confinement. Basically, if it was even longer than a couple of weeks, they started to see changes like acute neurosis, psychosis in these prisoners, whereas they would let them out on their own and they would get outside and like go crazy, fully naked, peeing, pooping, everything, rolling around it, like just do some really crazy stuff because they could not synchronize. They could not co-regulate with anyone. So it was a free for all and they were left to their own defenses and they had no way of helping to self-regulate. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of goodness in these first few chapters are loaded, but really just defining the framework about why connection and intimacy and that us is so much more important than that you versus me, and how individuality, no matter how society wants to push that so much these days, like you be you, you do you, boo, right? Like the individuality piece is actually to our detriment. And so hopefully you guys will follow along with us as we continue in our book club and talking about this book, and just a lot of good nuggets from Terry Real. And he has a lot of good stuff online, a lot of good YouTube videos. So check him out. So thank you for listening today. We are super excited that we have a new free video. So scroll down in the show notes to check it out. And until next time, you are whole, you're a gift to medicine, and the work you do matters.